Hi everyone, I'm back at the Marginalian because there is this article on Viktor Frankl that I'm absolutely digging right now. So, Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor, and I will explain to you his journey in his own words. And even after surviving the Holocaust, if a person can write a book and conceive a concept like logotherapy, which means that even in spite of suffering, life has meaning. I don't know what to say. That is just his words actually changed my life, and there is no two ways about it. This is Maria Popova's blog on Viktor Frankl's collection of essays. So, this blog post starts with a quote by Albert Camus, and he has written a book called The Stranger. It's a novel, it's a very short novel by Albert Camus, and it's a must read if you guys are into any kind of writing which is transformative. Okay, to decide whether life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question of philosophy. That is what he is saying. And usually, when we are going through some kind of existential crisis, we are contemplating, what is the point of all this, especially when we are facing some dark times in our lives. We have these existential questions that we have, right? These kind of questions claw at us, just making us just wonder what's the whole point of this existence. So imagine a person like Viktor Frankl. Okay, he was a Viennese neurologist and a psychiatrist, okay, before being captured and taken to Auschwitz. So there, Frankl loses his father, his brother, to the mass murder of the concentration camps. Okay, his life is spared literally just by a thread. That's what you can say. It has been documented in his own biography, Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm going to show you some of the most impactful statements from that book. Here, this is Holocaust disillusioned humanity with itself. So he's talking about two polar opposites. Okay. So because of the Holocaust that happened, humanity kind of sort of got disillusioned with its whole purpose. What's the point of living if we are all going to die, especially if we are going to die such a cruel death? That is what happened to people when they were facing the Holocaust. And on the other spectrum, he's talking about the blithe optimism of the previous, more naive generations that existed before these generations that faced the Holocaust. Okay, so he says both of them stem from a philosophy called nihilism. What's the point of existence? It's so pessimistic and negative. Okay, but he says, let us try to understand the whole point of suffering in our life. We cannot move towards any spiritual reconstruction with a sense of fatalism such as this. We cannot think that if we have to go through this suffering, what's the point of our existence, right? But the spiritual reconstruction. So, how do you repair yourself? What is this spiritual reconstruction? The repairing of the self, the inner self. How can it happen if we are so negative towards what is happening to us? Let us try to find meaning in our suffering. That is what he's saying. So here he says everything depends on the individual human being, regardless of how a small number of like minded people there is, and everything depends on each person through action and not mere words. So if we find that there is no meaning in our life, what he's saying is through actions like selfless service or thinking outside of ourselves, we can try to find meaning in our existence. Because we have got this valuable life for ourselves. Why worry about the things that we are facing? Why worry about all the suffering that we are facing? Why not find meaning and create meaning by our actions? That's what he is recommending. So, this is the main point of the essay that I want to drive home here. So he is saying, let us take the example of a prisoner who is going to be put to death row tomorrow morning. And the guard comes and asks him, what is your last meal going to be? You're free to decide. So at that point, the prisoner he's thinking to himself that it is quite irrelevant whether he gets good food in his stomach or not, because in a few hours he will be a corpse. So, if that is the case, that is his thought process, what he's saying is, if the whole of life stands in the face of death, and if that man has to be right, then our whole lives will also be meaningless. Because if we were to only strive for pleasure and nothing else, so if that guy, the prisoner, is not willing to indulge in that pleasure because he's like, what's the point? Then we also, as humans who are facing our death without even knowing when it is going to come to us, if we are going to pursue only pleasure, then what's the point? Okay. And preferably the most pleasure and the highest degree of pleasure possible. That's what we are seeking. We always want to be happy. We just don't want any suffering. So here is the main point. Pleasure in itself cannot give our existence meaning, right? If that is true, removal of pleasure also will not render it meaningless. That's what he's saying. If you are okay, so if you are finally agreeing that, nah, it's okay, pleasure only does not give my life meaning, it's okay. So removing pleasure also will not render it meaningless. This is a brilliant point. So in essence, he is saying, let us try to find meaning in our suffering. Let me show you the exact words that he's talking about suffering. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This is a game changer, guys, if you haven't read it yet. He has written this after surviving 3 years in a concentration camp in Auschwitz. He says, life has meaning under all circumstances, even the most miserable ones. What he says about suffering is, what hurts is not the physical pain, but the injustice of it all. That is what hurts the most. When we think about it, not the physical pain that he endures, lack of food, extreme hard daily labor that he has to perform in the fields with bare minimum, not even a breadcrumb in his mouth the whole day. He says that is not what is the pain. The pain is the injustice of why he has to go through, and so many around him have to go through this. One of the most important sentences in that is, I mean, this is a global phenomena if you haven't heard of this quote yet. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So, suffering, you cannot avoid it, especially if it is out of your control, right? Things happen, shit happens. How will you respond between that stimulus that happened to you and your response to it? Is where lies your growth and your freedom. The choice to choose happiness and endurance in spite of everything. So please check this book out. I absolutely love this because for me personally, over a decade ago, this has been a game changer. So everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Viktor Frankl. So check these out, guys, and I hope you get a chance to read the book. And thank you.